Era demasiado grande. Ella rogo por ayuda, y lo que hizo él sorprendió a todos. The sun was shining brightly, and the streets were slowly filling with neighbors carrying tables, decorations, and baskets of homemade treats. Everyone was excited because this fair was special, not just any ordinary gathering, but something that would bring the whole neighborhood together after a long, quiet year. Children ran around laughing, and parents helped set up small stalls with games, snacks, and handmade crafts. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, and Mariana felt proud of how well everyone was working together. However, her smile faded when she approached the center of the main park. There it was, the large structure that was supposed to serve as the main attraction for the fair. Mariana had imagined it standing tall, beautiful, and sturdy, welcoming everyone with a cheerful display. But reality struck immediately. The structure was far bigger and heavier than she had expected. She stepped back and took a deep breath, trying to imagine how it could possibly be moved into place. She bent down, touching the edge, hoping somehow it would feel lighter or manageable, but it didn't. The weight pressed down like a solid wall, unyielding and impossible. She tried lifting it a little, then pushing from one side and even dragging it slightly. Nothing worked. It didn't budge. Panic started creeping in. Mariana looked around, hoping someone else could step in and help. A few neighbors were nearby, chatting and laughing, not yet realizing the problem that had arisen. "Excuse me," she called out, waving her arms. "I need help with this." A few heads turned, but when they saw the enormous size of the structure, their eyes widened in worry. One neighbor stepped forward, tried pushing from one side and immediately stepped back, shaking his head. "Mariana, it's too heavy." "We can't move it alone," he said. Others murmured in agreement. Some suggested calling a moving company, but that would take time and cost money, and the fair was supposed to start in just a few hours. Mariana felt her heart sink. She could see the decorations waiting, the children already gathering around excitedly, and the food stalls almost ready. Everything depended on this main attraction being set up. The thought of canceling part of the fair made her chest tighten. She sank onto a nearby bench, rubbing her temples. What had she overlooked? How could she have misjudged the size? She had double-checked measurements, but clearly something had gone wrong. The structure was not just heavy, it was immense. Its base spanned almost the width of the main pathway, and it towered higher than she had remembered from the plan. Every angle she looked from made it seem bigger and more intimidating. She closed her eyes, imagining the disappointed faces of children who had been waiting for the centerpiece of the fair. Her mind raced for solutions. There had to be a way. There had to be someone who could help. With a deep breath, she stood up and walked toward the nearest group of neighbors. "Please," she said, trying to keep her voice calm but firm, "can someone help me figure this out? I can't do this alone." A few people stepped closer, curiosity mixed with hesitation. They looked at the massive structure and whispered among themselves. "It's enormous," one said. "Maybe we should wait for professional help." Mariana shook her head. There was no time for waiting. The fair was about to start and every minute counted. "We can do it together," she said, trying to sound confident even though doubt gnawed at her. She scanned the crowd, searching for anyone who looked capable of handling a challenge like this. Then she remembered Daniel. He lived just 2 blocks away and was known in the neighborhood as someone who could handle almost anything. If there was a way to solve a difficult problem, he usually found it. People respected him not just for his strength, but for his calm and clever mind. Mariana had met him at a few community events, but they weren't close friends. Still, desperate times called for desperate measures. She pulled out her phone and dialed his number, hoping he would pick up. When he answered, she could hear a friendly tone, completely unaware of the chaos that had erupted in the park. She explained the situation quickly, her words tumbling over each other. Daniel listened quietly, then asked a few questions, not sounding worried at all. "Don't worry," he said finally. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." Mariana felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe it wasn't hopeless after all. While waiting, she tried to calm the growing crowd around the structure. Children were peeking curiously from behind tables. Adults were talking nervously, and some were already suggesting ways to move it. Mariana smiled weakly, thanking them for trying but asking them to stay safe and wait for Daniel's arrival. She paced back and forth, thinking about how such a small miscalculation could lead to such a huge problem. The structure had looked fine on paper, but seeing it in real life made all the plans and measurements feel inadequate. Every minute that passed seemed to make it heavier in her mind. Sweat formed on her forehead, and she felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. When Daniel finally arrived, the atmosphere changed. People instinctively gave him space as he approached, carrying only a small toolkit and wearing a calm expression. He looked at the structure carefully, turning around it, examining its base, weight distribution, and the surrounding space. He didn't rush, didn't panic, and didn't complain. Instead, he asked Mariana questions: how it had been moved before, what tools were available, and how much time they had. Then he nodded as if a plan had already formed in his mind. Mariana explained the urgency, her voice slightly trembling. Daniel listened patiently, then smiled reassuringly. "We can do this," he said simply. That small phrase carried more weight than Mariana expected. For the first time since the morning began, she felt that the impossible might be possible. As he started organizing the space and instructing a few volunteers, the crowd began to watch with renewed attention. Daniel didn't try to lift or push immediately. Instead, he pointed to certain spots, suggested tools, and showed how using simple levers and careful coordination could make the structure move without anyone risking injury. Mariana followed his directions, handing ropes, steadying parts, and encouraging neighbors to stay coordinated. Slowly, very slowly, they began to shift the structure. The crowd's whispering turned into quiet murmurs of awe as they realized that something that had seemed immovable was now inching forward under careful guidance. Mariana felt a mix of relief and excitement. Her heart was still pounding, but now it wasn't just from fear. It was from hope. She glanced at the faces of the volunteers. Neighbors she had never seen as capable in such situations were now working together, lifting slightly, pushing gently, and following Daniel's instructions perfectly. She realized that the problem, while terrifying at first, had brought people together in a way she hadn't imagined. Children were cheering from a safe distance, parents were coordinating with calm determination, and even the most doubtful neighbors were now part of the solution. Mariana smiled, thinking that perhaps the true beauty of the fair wasn't just the decorations or the games, but the way people came together when faced with a challenge. The first shift of the structure was small but significant. Everyone held their breath, and when it moved, even slightly, a collective cheer rose from the crowd. Mariana felt tears prick her eyes, not from fear anymore but from gratitude and pride. This was more than a structure. It was a symbol of the neighborhood spirit. It wasn't perfect yet, and the task was far from complete, but for the first time that morning she felt confident. With Daniel's guidance, the impossible seemed manageable. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but at least now there was a plan, and more importantly, there was hope. Daniel had arrived just in time. Mariana watched as he assessed the situation with calm eyes, his hands resting on his hips as he scanned the enormous structure. While others panicked or whispered nervously, Daniel seemed completely composed, almost as if he had faced challenges like this before, and perhaps he had. He didn't rush or make exaggerated gestures. Instead, he stood quietly for a moment, observing every detail: the weight distribution, the uneven ground beneath the structure, and the small spaces available for maneuvering. Mariana felt a mixture of awe and relief. It was as if someone had brought a breath of fresh air into a room filled with tension. Daniel's first words were simple but confident. "We can move this, but we need to do it step by step." Rushing will make it dangerous, and we can't risk anyone getting hurt." Mariana nodded quickly, trying to follow every instruction, feeling both anxious and hopeful. Daniel began giving clear directions to the volunteers and neighbors who had gathered. Some looked doubtful at first, unsure whether ordinary people could manage such a massive object. But Daniel's calm, methodical approach slowly reassured them. He started explaining that the weight of the structure could work in their favor if they used levers, ropes, and careful coordination. His knowledge wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was practical, effective, and clear. The first task was to secure the base. Daniel called over a few volunteers, asking them to hold ropes tightly while others positioned wooden planks underneath the structure. "These will help us slide it gently, without scraping or damaging anything," he explained. Mariana helped, holding one of the ropes with careful tension. She was amazed at how Daniel thought about every small detail. Every corner, every inch, every angle had been considered. She could see the excitement growing in the volunteers' faces. What had seemed impossible just minutes ago now felt like a challenge that could be overcome with teamwork. Children, of course, were curious. A few had sneaked close to watch, peeking from behind tables or standing on tiptoe to get a better view. Daniel noticed them immediately. "Stay back, little ones," he called kindly, smiling at their fascination. "You'll get to see the big moment from here safely." His calm reassurance made the children feel included rather than ignored. Mariana smiled as she realized Daniel wasn't just solving the physical problem. He was also handling the crowd, keeping everyone safe while maintaining their interest. Once the base was secured, Daniel started explaining how they would actually move the structure. He demonstrated using a smaller plank and rope first, showing how gentle pressure at the right points could gradually shift weight without anyone straining themselves. The volunteers tried mimicking his movements, and slowly, the massive object began to respond. A tiny shift, almost imperceptible at first, occurred. Mariana's heart jumped. It had moved. The volunteers cheered quietly, careful not to get overexcited. Daniel nodded, clearly pleased, and encouraged them to continue with patience. "Remember," he said, slow and steady. "Every small step counts." Some neighbors who had initially doubted the plan now stepped forward to help. Daniel divided everyone into small teams. One group handled the ropes, another guided the wooden planks, and a few others ensured the structure didn't tilt dangerously. Mariana found herself in the middle of it all, moving back and forth, giving encouragement, and doing whatever she could to assist. She realized that her initial panic had shifted into a sense of purpose and determination. The fair, which had seemed like it might fail, now had a chance to succeed because people were working together. As the structure inched forward, Daniel gave careful, calm instructions at every stage. "A little more to the left, steady. Yes, keep it balanced, perfect." Mariana noticed the crowd of onlookers growing, neighbors who hadn't been involved now watching in awe. People were murmuring among themselves, impressed by the coordination and leadership on display. Children clapped when the structure moved a little more. Adults whispered about how clever Daniel's plan was, how he managed to make everyone feel confident despite the difficulty. It was becoming clear that what Mariana had feared would be impossible was turning into a community success story right before their eyes. The real challenge came when they had to rotate the structure to fit into its final position. Daniel paused, his sharp eyes scanning the angle. "This is the trickiest part," he said, "but we can do it if we all work together." He instructed volunteers to adjust the ropes slowly while others used the planks as a pivot. Mariana could feel the tension in the air. Every small movement mattered. She held her breath as the structure began to pivot, creaking slightly but holding firm. People leaned in, supporting their teams and coordinating with precision. It was like watching a well-rehearsed performance, except the stakes were real and failure wasn't an option. Minutes felt like hours as they continued. Sweat ran down faces, muscles ached, and yet no one complained. Daniel's calm presence kept the team steady. He moved around the structure, giving instructions, checking positions, and offering encouragement. "That's it, steady, hold, excellent." His voice was constant, reassuring, and confident. Mariana felt a wave of admiration for him. Not only did he have the skill to solve the problem, but he also had the ability to inspire trust and confidence in everyone around him. She realized that without his leadership, the structure would likely still be unmoved, and the fair might have faced disaster. As the structure finally approached its intended spot, the crowd grew even more excited. People began to whisper about how incredible it was to see the impossible slowly becoming reality. Children clapped and pointed, adults nodded in approval, and Mariana felt a surge of pride. She watched Daniel coordinate the final adjustments, carefully guiding the structure into place with the help of every volunteer. The tension of the morning transformed into excitement and relief. When the last shift was made and the structure finally stood exactly where it was meant to, a cheer erupted from the crowd. Mariana felt tears prick her eyes. What had seemed like a disaster just an hour ago had turned into a moment of triumph. Daniel smiled modestly, wiping sweat from his forehead, and motioned for everyone to step back and admire the result. The structure stood tall and secure, perfectly positioned as the centerpiece of the fair. Mariana walked around it, inspecting every angle, and realized that it looked even better than she had imagined. The neighbors were still talking excitedly. Many came up to thank Daniel personally, but he waved them off with humility. "We all did this together," he said. "It wasn't just me." Mariana nodded in agreement. She had learned something important. While leadership and skill are essential, cooperation, trust, and willingness to try can make even the most impossible challenges achievable. The sense of community was stronger than ever, and the fair was ready to begin. As people started returning to their stalls and organizing the last touches, Mariana felt a renewed energy. She smiled at the volunteers who had helped, at the children who had watched with wide eyes, and at Daniel, who quietly continued helping with minor adjustments. The morning that had begun with panic and uncertainty had turned into a story of teamwork, calm thinking, and surprising solutions. Mariana knew that this moment would be remembered by everyone present, not just as the day of the fair, but as the day the community came together to achieve the impossible. Once the structure was finally in place, a wave of excitement washed over Mariana. The main challenge had been overcome, but she knew the next part of the fair would bring a different kind of responsibility. It wasn't just about moving the structure anymore. Now it was about making sure everything looked perfect and functioned properly. Mariana could see the decorations she had painstakingly planned, from colorful banners to handmade signs, sitting nearby, waiting to be set up. The children were running around, eager to explore, and parents were arranging tables and organizing games. The energy in the park was electric, and everyone seemed motivated by the success of the morning's challenge. Daniel, however, remained calm and focused. He wasn't just resting on the accomplishment of moving the structure. He moved around the area with quiet confidence, checking that the ropes, planks, and supports used to shift the structure were safely removed, and ensuring nothing posed a hazard. Volunteers followed his lead, cleaning up the work area and carefully inspecting every part of the structure. "Safety first," he reminded everyone gently. Mariana noticed how natural it was for Daniel to lead. His presence made even nervous volunteers feel confident, and every instruction he gave seemed logical and clear. With the structure safely in position, Daniel turned his attention to the next step, preparing the area for visitors and making the fair attractive and welcoming. He suggested rearranging a few tables to create a clear path around the centerpiece, so children and adults could move safely without bumping into anything. Mariana, and a group of volunteers quickly followed his plan, adjusting the layout exactly as he indicated. It was impressive how one person's thoughtful guidance could transform a chaotic scene into a smooth-running setup. Mariana realized that the morning's challenge had not only tested physical strength, but also problem-solving, creativity, and organization. As people began decorating the structure, Daniel stood back and observed, offering small suggestions here and there. He pointed out that hanging banners slightly higher would make them more visible from a distance. He also suggested that volunteers distribute games and activities evenly around the park, so visitors would not crowd one area while ignoring another. Mariana followed his advice, moving tables and organizing volunteers to execute his plan. She noticed how his ideas were simple yet effective, designed to maximize efficiency without creating confusion. Every action was deliberate, and the entire group seemed to respond to his calm direction. The children were particularly fascinated by Daniel. They watched closely as he adjusted ropes, moved tables, and spoke to volunteers. Some of the younger kids even tried to imitate him, pretending to guide the setup in their own playful way. Daniel smiled warmly at their antics, never scolding them but gently redirecting their energy when necessary. Mariana thought it was remarkable how he balanced work and encouragement, keeping everyone productive while maintaining a positive atmosphere. She realized that his ability to remain calm under pressure had transformed a stressful situation into a learning experience for everyone present. Meanwhile, Mariana herself was learning more about the importance of patience and teamwork. She remembered how frantic she had been earlier, worried about moving the enormous structure alone. Now, working with Daniel and the volunteers, she could see the value of listening, observing, and trusting others. Each small decision contributed to the larger goal, and every person's effort mattered. She felt grateful for the help and support, realizing that the fair's success depended on more than just planning. It depended on cooperation, communication, and community spirit. Daniel noticed that the final details needed attention to make the structure more interactive for visitors. He suggested adding small signs explaining the story behind the structure, so children and adults could learn while enjoying the fair. Volunteers quickly printed and hung the signs, turning the centerpiece into both an attraction and an educational piece. Mariana walked around, checking that everything was in place, and she felt a sense of pride. The park, once a chaotic space filled with anxiety, now looked vibrant, organized, and welcoming. The transformation was almost magical, and Mariana could hardly believe the difference a few hours and careful planning had made. The community began to gather in anticipation. Neighbors who had been watching from a distance earlier now stepped closer, eager to participate. Parents guided their children through games, and vendors prepared snacks and drinks. The air was filled with laughter, chatter, and the sweet smells of baked goods. Mariana noticed how everyone seemed more connected after the morning's challenge. The shared effort had created a sense of unity and pride, and people were now actively helping each other without being asked. Daniel's leadership had sparked not only efficiency, but also a feeling of togetherness among everyone present. As the fair progressed, a few minor challenges arose. A table collapsed under the weight of supplies, and some decorations threatened to fall due to a sudden gust of wind. Daniel immediately stepped in, calmly directing volunteers to fix the problems without creating panic. "It's okay," he said with a reassuring smile. "We can handle this." His attitude was contagious, and the volunteers quickly adjusted, securing tables and reinforcing banners. Mariana realized that what had impressed her most was not just his problem-solving skills, but his ability to stay composed in unexpected situations, making others feel capable and confident. At one point, a group of children gathered around the structure, pointing at certain features and asking questions. Daniel knelt down to explain in simple terms how the structure had been moved and set in place. He described how teamwork, patience, and careful planning had turned an impossible task into a successful result. The children listened intently, their eyes wide with curiosity. Mariana watched as Daniel's explanation inspired them, realizing that the morning's challenge had become an educational moment for everyone, not just a problem that had been solved. Mariana also noticed how Daniel encouraged volunteers to take initiative. "You can try adjusting this banner yourself," he said to one young man. "I'll guide you if needed, but give it a try." The volunteer hesitated at first, but then successfully completed the task. Daniel's quiet encouragement allowed people to gain confidence and pride in their contributions, reinforcing the idea that success was shared, not just dependent on one person. Mariana felt inspired, seeing how leadership could empower others rather than dominate them. By midday, the park was transformed. The structure stood proudly at the center, surrounded by games, decorations, and happy visitors. Children ran from one activity to another, laughter echoing across the park. Parents chatted and helped guide the little ones, and volunteers moved gracefully from task to task, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Mariana felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't expected. The morning's problem had tested her patience, her creativity, and her ability to ask for help. But with Daniel's guidance and the cooperation of the community, the fair was now a vibrant, lively, and joyous event. As she watched the crowd, Mariana felt a deep sense of gratitude. Daniel's calm and clever approach had not only solved a physical challenge, but had also created an atmosphere of trust, teamwork, and learning. She realized that the morning's chaos had become an opportunity to witness the strength and unity of the community, the power of calm leadership, and the remarkable results that could emerge when people worked together. By the time the fair reached its peak, Mariana noticed smiles on everyone's faces, from children playing games to volunteers proudly checking that everything was in order. Even the neighbors who had initially doubted whether the structure could be moved were now nodding in approval, impressed by what had been accomplished. Mariana felt a deep sense of pride, not just in the fair itself, but in the community spirit and the courage to face challenges together. Daniel quietly assisted where needed, never seeking recognition but fully aware of the impact his guidance had made. The success of the fair was no longer just about decorations, games, or the centerpiece structure. It was about the collaboration, trust, and problem-solving that had allowed everyone to enjoy the day without fear or worry. Mariana smiled as she thought about the morning's panic, now replaced by excitement and laughter. What had seemed impossible had become a triumph, and the lesson was clear. With patience, leadership, and teamwork, even the most daunting challenges could be overcome. The fair was now in full swing, but Mariana knew the true test had not yet come. Moving the massive structure had been a significant challenge, and organizing the fair around it had required focus and patience, but now it was time to see how it would perform under real conditions. Children were running around excitedly, parents were busy helping their little ones, and volunteers were attending to every small detail. The park was alive with energy and laughter, yet Mariana kept glancing nervously at the centerpiece structure. Despite all precautions, she knew that any misstep could cause problems, and the pressure weighed heavily on her. Daniel, ever calm, was observing the entire scene. He walked around the structure, occasionally adjusting minor details, tightening a rope here or repositioning a plank there. His eyes were sharp, noticing even the smallest risks. Mariana admired his focus and the way he seemed to anticipate problems before they even appeared. It was clear that the safety and success of the fair mattered deeply to him, yet he never let stress affect his demeanor. He spoke softly to volunteers, giving clear, confident instructions, and everyone responded quickly. Mariana realized that the real magic was not just in moving the structure, but in maintaining its stability and ensuring a safe environment for everyone. Suddenly, a group of children ran toward the centerpiece, giggling and shouting. They wanted to explore the structure up close, touching it and examining the features. Mariana's heart skipped a beat. She rushed forward, waving her hands. "Careful, don't climb yet." The children stopped, looking slightly disappointed but understanding the warning. Daniel stepped forward calmly, smiling at their curiosity. "You'll get to see it safely," he said. Then he organized a group of volunteers to create a safe viewing area around the structure. He positioned ropes to guide children and parents while keeping them at a safe distance. Mariana watched as the children's disappointment turned into excitement as they followed the path Daniel had created. Once again, his quick thinking had turned a potential problem into a positive experience. As the fair continued, a sudden gust of wind blew through the park. Banners flapped violently, and one of the tables holding snacks wobbled dangerously. Gasps spread through the crowd. Mariana felt her stomach tighten, fearing that the wind might affect the massive structure. Daniel reacted immediately. He calmly instructed volunteers to hold the ropes, secure the planks, and adjust the position of the structure slightly to prevent tipping. No one panicked. The volunteers, inspired by his calm demeanor, worked swiftly and efficiently. Within moments, the situation was under control. Mariana realized that the fair's success relied not only on physical preparation, but also on the ability to remain composed under unexpected circumstances. Meanwhile, the children's laughter and the parents' chatter added to the festive atmosphere. Daniel noticed a small problem with the viewing area. A narrow gap between the ropes could lead to crowding, making it unsafe. He signaled a few volunteers to widen the space, ensuring everyone could see the structure safely while maintaining order. Mariana was amazed at how he could handle multiple challenges simultaneously: safety, organization, and even the enjoyment of visitors, all without appearing rushed or stressed. His actions demonstrated a rare combination of practical skill and empathy, and Mariana felt grateful for his presence. As the afternoon progressed, more visitors arrived. Local neighbors who had heard about the fair came to see the massive centerpiece structure. Mariana noticed their eyes widen as they approached, clearly impressed by its size and design. Children pointed excitedly, parents took pictures, and even some skeptical neighbors nodded in appreciation. Daniel took this moment to explain briefly to visitors how the structure had been moved. He described the teamwork, the careful planning, and the use of ropes and planks, making sure to emphasize that it was a shared effort, not just his accomplishment. Visitors listened attentively, and Mariana could see the admiration in their faces. The structure had become not just an attraction, but a symbol of community effort and clever problem-solving. Around the structure, small incidents continued to occur, as they always do during busy events. A volunteer dropped a basket of supplies, a child tripped on a loose rope, and a few tables shifted under the weight of snacks and drinks. Each time, Daniel responded calmly and efficiently, giving instructions and guiding the volunteers to correct the problem. Mariana noticed that the crowd began to watch him with curiosity, realizing that this man had turned what could have been a stressful situation into a well-managed, organized, and safe event. His presence was reassuring, and people instinctively followed his guidance, knowing that everything was under control. At one point, Mariana herself faced a small panic moment. One of the banners had started to fall, and a gust of wind threatened to topple it completely. She froze for a second, unsure what to do, until Daniel appeared at her side. Without hesitation, he guided her, explaining step by step how to secure the banner safely. They worked together, and soon the banner was perfectly in place. Mariana realized how much she had learned just by watching and assisting him: patience, calm decision-making, and teamwork could overcome even sudden challenges. She felt proud not only of what had been accomplished, but also of her own growth through the experience. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the fair entered its peak hours. Music played softly from nearby speakers, children ran from game to game, and volunteers assisted with snacks and drinks. Mariana noticed that the centerpiece structure had become the focal point of the entire fair. People were taking pictures, gathering around for a closer look, and asking questions. Daniel walked among the crowd, answering questions politely and guiding visitors safely. His actions were so natural that it seemed as if he had done this many times before, yet Mariana knew that no one could have predicted the earlier challenges of the morning. The real moment of awe came when a small demonstration was planned around the structure. Daniel suggested a creative idea, to show how teamwork and clever planning had allowed the structure to be moved safely. He invited a few children to help him demonstrate simple moves, while he supervised closely. The children's eyes widened with excitement as Daniel explained in simple, engaging words. Volunteers assisted by holding ropes and guiding movements safely. Visitors watched, impressed at how even the children could participate under Daniel's careful instruction. The demonstration ended with applause and laughter, turning a technical challenge into an interactive and memorable experience for the community. Mariana looked around and felt a deep sense of relief and pride. The morning had begun with chaos and anxiety, but now the fair was not just functional. It was vibrant, safe, and filled with joy. Daniel had turned what could have been a disaster into a celebration of creativity, collaboration, and problem-solving. Even small issues like wind, crowding, and loose items had been handled efficiently, and the fair continued without major problems. Mariana realized that the day had become a lesson not only in logistics, but also in leadership, empathy, and patience. As the day progressed toward evening, the centerpiece structure became a symbol of the fair's success. Children gathered around to explore safely, parents watched with satisfaction, and volunteers moved with confidence, guided by Daniel's calm leadership. Mariana felt grateful for his help, knowing that without him, the morning's chaos might have turned into disappointment. Instead, the impossible task had been turned into a source of inspiration for everyone present. By the time the fair began to wind down, visitors were still excitedly discussing the day's events. Mariana noticed conversations highlighting the teamwork, the clever strategies used, and the calm leadership that had turned a potential disaster into a triumph. Daniel quietly assisted where needed, never seeking recognition, yet clearly aware of the impact he had made. Mariana knew that the day would be remembered not just as a fair, but as a story of resilience, intelligence, and community spirit. The success of the fair and the safe handling of the massive structure showed Mariana, and everyone else, that even the most challenging problems could be overcome with clear thinking, teamwork, and calm determination. She smiled as she watched the crowd leave with happy faces, children laughing and parents expressing their appreciation. What had begun as panic and fear had transformed into a celebration of clever solutions, hard work, and shared effort. Daniel's actions had not only ensured the fair's success, but also left a lasting impression of what calm leadership and teamwork could achieve. As the sun began to set, the fair slowly started to quiet down. The laughter of children and chatter of parents began to soften, leaving behind a sense of calm accomplishment. Mariana walked slowly through the park, observing the scene with a mix of pride and relief. What had begun as a morning, filled with panic and fear, had now turned into a day of triumph and joy. The massive structure, which had seemed impossible to move just hours earlier, now stood tall and stable at the center of the park, attracting admiration from everyone who passed by. Mariana felt a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had helped make this day a success. Daniel, as always, remained calm and attentive. He was walking around, quietly assisting volunteers and checking that everything remained safe and organized. Despite the attention he was receiving from curious neighbors and children, he never seemed to seek recognition. Mariana watched him carefully, noticing how effortlessly he balanced leadership with humility. His actions throughout the day had not only solved the practical challenges of moving the structure and organizing the fair, but it also inspired the community and taught valuable lessons about teamwork and calm problem-solving. Mariana approached him, her heart full of appreciation. "Daniel," she said softly, "I don't know how to thank you enough. Today could have been a disaster, but you turned it into something amazing." Daniel smiled, brushing off the compliment with modesty. "We did it together," he said simply. "Everyone helped, and that's what made it possible." Mariana nodded, realizing that his words were true. It wasn't just him. It was the combined effort of everyone who had pitched in, followed instructions, and stayed focused. As the evening progressed, neighbors began to share their experiences of the day. People who had been skeptical at first spoke about how impressed they were by the teamwork, the clever solutions, and the calm guidance provided by Daniel. Parents talked about how children had learned the importance of safety and cooperation while watching the structure being moved. Children excitedly recounted how they had participated in small tasks, feeling proud to be part of something bigger than themselves. Mariana listened to these stories with a growing sense of pride. She realized that the day had become more than just a fair. It had become a lesson in community spirit and shared achievement. Daniel took a moment to address a small group of volunteers, explaining the importance of communication and preparation. "Every problem we face today could have been overwhelming if we hadn't stayed calm and worked together," he said. "By thinking carefully and helping one another, we turned challenges into successes. Remember this lesson. It applies to everything, not just today's fair." The volunteers nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Mariana felt inspired as she watched the impact of Daniel's guidance on everyone present. It was clear that his approach had created a lasting impression of responsibility, patience, and clever problem-solving. While the fair had been the center of attention, Mariana realized that the true achievement was not the games, decorations, or food. It was the way the community had come together. People had supported one another, followed instructions, and acted with care and respect. The once daunting structure had become a symbol of what could be accomplished when everyone worked together. Mariana walked around, observing children playing safely, neighbors chatting happily, and volunteers cleaning up efficiently. She felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond the visual success of the fair. It was a deep emotional fulfillment, knowing that the morning's fears had transformed into a day of unity and joy. As volunteers began to pack up, Mariana and Daniel stayed near the structure to ensure that everything was secure. They talked quietly about the events of the day, reflecting on the challenges and successes. "I never imagined it would be this difficult," Mariana admitted. "But I also never imagined it could turn out this amazing." Daniel nodded. "Every challenge has a solution if we stay calm and work together," he said. Mariana smiled, realizing that this simple principle had guided the entire day and made it a memorable experience for everyone involved. The children, now tired but happy, ran to say goodbye to Daniel and Mariana. They hugged the adults and waved excitedly, expressing their thanks for a fair that had been safe, fun, and full of excitement. Mariana noticed how much joy the day had brought, not just through games and treats, but through participation, learning, and shared effort. Daniel knelt down to speak to the children, praising them for listening carefully, helping safely, and being part of the success. Their wide eyes and beaming smiles showed that they had truly understood the importance of cooperation, patience, and teamwork. Mariana took a deep breath, reflecting on the transformation of the day. She remembered the panic of the morning, the moment when the structure had seemed impossible to move, and the worry that had consumed her. She remembered asking neighbors for help, and how uncertain everyone had felt at first. But through Daniel's guidance, everyone had found a way to contribute, solving problems step by step and turning chaos into order. Mariana realized that the day had been a lesson in resilience, problem-solving, and the power of human cooperation. As the sun set completely, casting a golden glow over the park, Mariana and Daniel finally took a moment to stand back and admire the result. The fair had been a success, the structure was perfectly in place, and the community had experienced a day filled with joy, learning, and collaboration. Mariana felt a deep sense of gratitude for Daniel, for the volunteers, and for every neighbor who had stepped in to help. She realized that the true magic of the day lay not in the physical achievements, but in the connections strengthened, trust built, and confidence gained by everyone involved. The story of the fair began to spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. People spoke about how an impossible challenge had been met with calm, clever planning, and teamwork. They remembered how Daniel had guided everyone without showing stress or impatience, turning fear into confidence and panic into a well-organized effort. Mariana noticed that the story inspired others as well, encouraging them to believe that any difficult problem could be solved with patience, creativity, and cooperation. As the last visitors left and the park became quiet, Mariana reflected on the lessons learned. She realized that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but a step toward success. She understood that leadership was not about taking control alone, but about guiding and inspiring others. She also saw that challenges, no matter how daunting, could bring people together in ways that were meaningful and lasting. Mariana felt proud not just of the fair, but of the community spirit, the teamwork, and the courage displayed by everyone that day. Daniel, as always, remained modest, quietly assisting with the final cleanup and ensuring the structure was secure for the night. Mariana thanked him once again, understanding that his calm, clever approach had made all the difference. The day had started with a daunting challenge, but it ended with a celebration of unity, problem-solving, and shared accomplishment. Mariana knew that this day would be remembered not only for the fun of the fair, but for the life lessons it had taught about patience, teamwork, and resilience. Finally, as Mariana walked home, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She thought about how fear and uncertainty had turned into joy and pride. She realized that even the largest challenges could be overcome when people worked together, stayed calm, and trusted in each other's abilities. The fair had been a success in every sense, and the story of the massive structure, the teamwork, and Daniel's surprising guidance would be told for years to come. Mariana smiled, knowing that the day had not only strengthened the community, but had also left a lasting impression on every heart that had been part of it.